Hello, and today we're going to take a look at the SK version of the straight jaw pliers wrench. Now they are calling this a groove joint pliers, but this is a pliers wrench. Okay, now digging into these, they seem like they're a little bit lower market type tool. This is probably along the lines of the Klein that we took a look at before. You can just kind of tell by the finish of it. In fact, there are some family resemblances in the way that the jaws are finished, but they could end there. There are some other differences, but there are some resemblances in the manufacturing process, so maybe they're similar, or there could be a different place that they're made at. But overall, these don't scream junk. Now, one interesting thing that these have is that if you move the handle all the way open, it forces the pin all the way out for the adjustment. You can see there we have the, as I open that up, it moves the pin. So you can kind of treat these like your old school channel locks, where you can do your lever flick and get them closed. So that's an interesting feature that we didn't see on any of these just yet. Now, as we start to run through our specs, we'll get our rule here, and let's take a look at what we're calling our key, and this is right at that 5/16 that we see a lot of them at, so that's somewhat on par with all of the others. Our jaw width is also right at 5/16 on the movable jaw, and right at 5/16 on the fixed jaw. At, yeah, I go with that. Pretty much right on 1 and 5/16. Okay, next up, what is our handle, or our maximum opening, all the way open, and our handles together? What is that dimension? We have 1 and 7/8, and then when we open our handle all the way, that is very open. We just get the 2. Just got 2. It's like 2 and a 32nd. It also opens up as it goes back. So that's closer to 2. That's like 2 and a 32nd. Next up, we're going to see how hard these are, and I am going to start at an HRC 55 on our fixed jaw, and I am digging in. So I'm going to go to a 50, and we're skating. So we're between a 50 and a 55 on both the fixed and the movable jaw. Okay, now if you got one of these, how much weight could you expect to carry around? We're right at that 19.5 ounces. Now, something else I like to talk about is, we talked about you can adjust this by opening the handle all the way, but how does this button work? And the button is very easy to push in and operate, which I don't really like. That's not something that I favor, because if you're using the tool, you can sometimes do those nuisance releases as you're adjusting and getting the tool into the workpiece. You can bump the side of something and knock it out. Now this, if you did and you had the space, you could move the handle open and get it to where you want it, but sometimes that all adds to the frustration, where we saw some of the other makes, like our Knipex and stuff, they had a little bit easier, or I should actually say harder to operate buttons, which I actually favor. because you don't have to worry as much where the Knipex here, if we just lightly push on the button, I can't adjust the tool. I have to kind of push in, and that is something that is better for me. Then you don't get that nuisance adjust. You know, you have the tool set where you want it and it stays there. Okay, next up we'll go over to the vise and see if we can get to 100 foot-pounds with this on our 5/8 Allen socket caps. Okay, here we are. We have our pliers wrench over at the vise, and we're going to see if we can get this up to 100 foot-pounds. Got 99.2 out of it. I think I could be satisfied with that. Okay, so we are back from the vise and we're at the microscope, so let's take a look at what happened here to our pliers. And we can see on the fixed jaw we have a noticeable mark on it, and we can feel that mark for sure with our rule here. So that's a definite indent in there. You can see the marking on the tool's side there. Not as much, a little bit on that side of the stationary jaw. Now here on the movable jaw, we don't have quite as much of a mark, which has been somewhat consistent with what we've been finding on these tools. The stationary jaw seems to be just a little harder, and though we can see that mark, I can barely feel it. I can just feel a little bit right there. And that also have a little bit of a note. You can just notice where that was. On this side we have a little bit more of a mark where we were at on that. So pretty interesting that you can see about where we tightened on that. There you go. We made a mark on both faces. That's definitely got a decent sized mark on it there though. So actually kind of on par with what we saw on the Klein pliers. We had a few goes at this. Kind of similar. Okay, so we are over at the load cell vise with our SK pliers, and we are gonna see how much force these can exert across our load cell. Now, while I open these up, so far these seem fairly similar to that Klein pair that we tested, so I'm gonna be curious to see what we get when we get into these. So we're going to set this up on the tip of the pliers, and we've been testing with the load cell towards the tip and then again towards the back. And that's been interesting to see because our specs are different at each spot. So we're going to get this, that our handle is just right at the load cell, and we're going to get this landed here. We're going to get to 5. Okay, so we're right at 5. We have 50, and we are open to 2 9/16. Okay, so here we go now. We're going to take this up to 75. And we might get quite a bit out of this. Might get 500 some. They seem to have flexed quite a bit. So we'll call it 550 at 75. which is pretty good. And what are we open? We are down to 1 7/8. Okay, so 550 is the number. If that's the case, this might get pretty high when we get this in there all the way. So now we're going to slide this back in here, and we should have more leverage now. So let's get that set about the same way. Okay. So we're going to go to 5. I've already overshot. Let's make sure everything is reset here. There we go. Okay, so we're all the way back. And let's get ourselves to 5. We're pretty close to 50 again. And what is our dimension? We're going to go 2.5. Alright, so we're going to crank this thing up to 275. Or crank it up to 75. And see what we have. It's going to be higher. Pretty high on that. That's pretty impressive, actually. We're going to call that 680. $75, 680, and we are at 1 15/16. I'd say we're pretty close with that reading. I think that's the highest number we've had so far. And just to show, I should be able to squeeze by hand and get pretty high, and I was able to. So I would say that's a reasonably realistic reading. Very interesting. Okay, so there we go. We did our test, and this has the highest rating so far at 600 kilograms, or 680 kilograms, on the back of the jaw. Our next one was the Knipex at 640, and then we have our Klein at 590. So they're all kind of close-ish. These are the better of the best 3 we've tested so far. Now, this is a different type of handle that would disperse the force a little differently, and I might not have been pressing right on the load cell like we were with the Knipex and the Klein, so take a little bit of fudge factor there, but I'd say these are all pretty close to being contemporaries without a whole lot of hesitation there. Now, the Knipex has the better jaws, although they all kind of say with the Rockwell that they're in that range as far as hardness. They all tested around the 50 to 55. I think the Knipex is closer to 55 than 50, and I think these are closer to 50 than 55, if that makes sense. Our hardness files are a little bit of a horseshoes and hand grenades scenario. So if we're digging in with a 50 and not a 50, or a 55 and not a 50, there's a little bit of, so, you know, it's not necessarily perfect. Now, something I am noticing here, if we line up the pivot point on all 3 of these, while we say that we're 10-inch pliers, you can see, let me get the pivot exact here, you can see that the SK is quite a bit different lengthwise than the other 2, and that right there might be your difference, because the handle is actually a bit longer on the SK. Just a little bit, not substantial, but we weren't seeing a substantial difference in what we had for our load cell reading. So that makes a little bit more sense. All three have about the same size key. This one might be a little bit bigger. I think this was the smallest. These two are probably the same. Metal's far better quality on the Knipex, hands down. The metal is about the same on these two. It's just got that, I guess I'll say it, it's got that kind of cheap feel to it. It's not, you don't get that quality tool feel when you touch these. They did go for a different handle on the SK here, which I kind of like. That's kind of a nice touch. It's got a nice feel to it. This is rubberized here, and the green's a little bit harder. I do kind of like the adjustivity of these, but I'd have to get into them and use them to see how nuisancey they are to adjust. I did notice when I adjusted it for the load cell, you're trying to, you overshoot a little bit, but some of that might just be use the tool a bunch and get used to it, and those problems are more of a non-issue once you're getting more accustomed to using your tools. So I don't think I would get too hard on things with that. So far, the only one that we had that was true 2-inch, they all advertise 2-inch, but the only one that was true 2-inch with the pliers open was the new Icon, even though they all advertise 2-inch. So far from what we tested, the new Icon opens up the furthest, and the old Icon is kind of, I'd say, bottom tier for what we've tested so far, but it does have a little bit more easy for me to, it does have a little bit better adjustment that's not quite as easy to push. So there's that on that. So I'd say still, between all of these, if you're going to buy it to use it every day, I think I'd still go Knipex. I'm kind of torn between these two. They're really honestly about the same quality, and they are about the same price market. We had the SK is right at the $30 range, and so is the Klein. So I think I'd whichever one you can get yourself a deal on, I guess. I don't think I see anything significant between these two. I think if I was going for the bigger stuff, I might be able to be persuaded to go with the newer version of the Icon, but I don't know. The Icons just don't have that feel to me anyway. So I think I would I'd go with one of these two if I was going for the down market version, and I'd still go Knipex with the heavier duty good stuff. Not really in the running, but we did look at it, is the Irwin. And looking at it now, the Irwin has kind of the similar handle dimensions. I did not notice it on the previous video, but the Irwin and the SK both have a harder handle, and it sticks out further. You don't have the rubberized grip, but they both do stick out further at the pivot point, which I do believe that is going to skew those numbers. And if you recall, we had decent numbers on the vice grip. The vice grip actually was a little bit better than the Icons in all of its in everything. So the Irwin might not quite be as good as what I thought, because that handle's longer, which might explain why that opened up on me. So there you have it. I'd say of the ones I'd want to stay away from, I would want to stay away from the Irwin, the vice grip. If you have it, I'm not ragging on it. I mean, if it does what you need it to do, I don't. It is what it is. I don't like to be negative about tools. If you have something and you like it and it works for you and does what you need it to do, by all means. But if I was to buy something that I don't already have, I think for the down market I'd go with the Klein or the SK. If I needed to close on 2-inch stuff that's actually 2-inch, I'd go with the new Icon. And if I wanted to have something that I could have for a long time and not worry about it failing, I'd go with the Knipex. I hope this was interesting. Let me know your thoughts below. I don't think the SK is necessarily a bad tool. I'm a little bit bummed out that this isn't a made in USA SK tool. It is made in China, and it's not a bad tool. It has some nice features. I'm not sure how I feel about the handle adjust. It might be nice, it might be annoying, but it does make it stand out from the others, where we had the vice grip, you had the handle-less adjustment to close it. This one has open the handle all the way, and you can adjust it that way. So that's interesting. Different spin on things, and we'll keep digging through some of these. I have others here. If anybody has any they'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. Maybe we'll do that one next week if I have it. Let me know in the comments below if you have the SK, if you like it, if there's things you don't like about it. Is this adjustment thing super handy, or does it become a little annoying sometimes? I don't think the handle adjusting would become annoying, because you generally don't have your handles open that far. I just wonder about the push button. Is that because it sticks out quite a bit? If you look at the profile, is that easy to push and adjust without intending to? Otherwise, let me know if you use this extensively, if you notice that you mar the jaws up a little bit here and there, or if they don't really get too beat up on your use. If there's any other issues with the tool, handles come loose or anything like that, I like to hear all those things and see them in the comments, and maybe it'll help other people out if they're looking to get these tools. So as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.